Thank you all very, very much for making it to the second edition or the second segment of our Physiology Model Series questions. Now, we already know that a tradition in Greatness Club is before we start our revision or our study together, we have to appreciate God for what the knowledge He has given to us. Because we know we are nothing without the knowledge given to us by God Almighty. So I'd like us to thank God for this segment we're about to start, and that He should take control of everything that will go on. Thank you, Lord, for this segment we're about to start. Be with us as we continue. Thank you. All right. Today we are going to continue from where we stopped last week. And the question for today is the number 2 question on the list of the Physiology Model Question Series. And the questions are, permit me to write them on the board. The first one is physics of gas diffusion. Physics of gas diffusion and gas partial pressure. And gas partial pressure. And gas partial pressure. Do you all have the questions? You have the questions? You don't have them? Alright, I'll do it to send them later. The second part of the question is concentration of oxygen and partial pressure and its partial pressure in the alveoli. Then we have CO2, carbon dioxide, concentration and its partial pressure also in the alveoli. We have the fourth point is diffusion of gases. Through the respiratory membrane. Now, this is the first part of the questions we are going to tackle today. Then, after which we'll go down to the other questions. But first and foremost, physics of gas diffusion and gas partial pressure. Now, I believe we did physics back in secondary school or in high school. And what's physics all about? What's physics all about?
It's about mechanisms.
Talking about what? Mechanism, physical what? Forces, and how they act on different what? Substances. Now, physics of what? Gas diffusion. What's the physics of gas diffusion? What are those forces that are involved in gas diffusion? And what are the mechanisms of gas diffusion? That's what we're talking about. Now, physics of gas diffusion states that, can I clean them up? Good. The physics of gas diffusion states that pressure of gas in a container is inversely proportional to the what? The volume. Pressure of gas in the container is inversely proportional to the what? The volume. Now, let me give you a simple diagram that will help us to remember basis of what? All we are going to discuss today. P stands for pressure, while V stands for volume. Now, what do we mean by this statement? When there is a what? A smaller volume, the pressure is what? High. And when there is a what? A higher volume, the pressure is what? Low. Now, let's take this to be a container. In a smaller container, a container with a what? Smaller diameter, the pressure in that container is what? Is high, compared to the pressure in a what? A larger container. Do you get the point? Do you get the correlation? So pressure is inversely proportional to what? Volume. Now, how does this relate to what we are going to talk about? We're going to continue. Now, good. Let's get this concept very clearly. Now, the next point I would like us to understand, I would like us to get is, what is partial pressure? What is partial pressure? Now, quickly, let me answer what is partial pressure. Partial pressure is the pressure exerted by an individual gas in a mixture. Now, we know in the inspired air, we have not just what? Oxygen. We have what? Oxygen. We have what? CO2 and nitrogen. The pressure exerted by oxygen alone, independent of carbon dioxide and nitrogen, is what we call what? The partial pressure of what? Oxygen. In that mixture of air. Are we getting the point? I want us to get this basis before we go into the discussion proper. So when we're talking about partial pressure, see it as what? Pressure exerted by an individual gas that is in a what? A mixture of different what? Gases. That is what we call what? The partial pressure of any gas or any mixture at all. I've gotten the point very well. Very good. Now, physics of gas diffusion and what? Gas partial pressure. What are the gases that we're going to what? Focus on basically today? Gases of importance to us is what? Oxygen and what? CO2. We are going to talk about the partial pressure in different parts of what? The respiratory system. Now, what's the partial pressure of oxygen in the alveoli? Good. Partial pressure of oxygen in the alveoli is equal to what? 104 or 102, depending on what the textbook and the context. So let's go with what? 102 millimeter of mercury. What's the partial pressure of CO2 in the alveoli? CO2 in the alveoli. It's about 40 millimeters of mercury. Very good. Are we getting the point very well? I want us to lay this foundation before we continue on. 40 millimeters of mercury. Very good. Now, these are the partial pressures of oxygen and CO2 in the what? Alveoli. And we know what we call the air-blood barrier, right? The aerohematic barrier. Do you know what we call the air-hematic barrier? No. Good. The air-blood barrier is the barrier between the what? The alveoli. Good. Between the alveoli and the what? Capillaries of the lungs. Please, if you don't get any point, I'm taking it slow like this so we'll get a point, okay? If you don't get it, please try to what? Tell me to stop and repeat that particular point again. Okay? That's why we have this time for us to discuss very well together. Alright. The aerohematic barrier or air-blood barrier is the barrier between the alveoli of the lungs and the what? Capillaries. The blood capillaries. Do you understand? Do you remember? Okay. I think we should maybe talk a little about the basis of circulation before we get down there. Good. We know lesser circulation and greater circulation, right? Greater circulation starts from greater circulation starts from
Left ventricle.
it starts from the left ventricle, from the outer down back to the what?
Right atrium. Right
Right
atrium.
atrium.
Right atrium.
Then the lesser circulation starts from the what?
Right atrium.
Right ventricle. Right what?
Atrium.
Right ventricle down to the what? Left
atrium.
atrium. Very good. Now, and we know that from pulmonary trunk, blood goes to what? The lungs. And from the lungs again, through what arteries?
Pulmonary veins.
Through pulmonary veins. From pulmonary veins, blood goes back to the what? To the heart, to the left ventricle, to the left atrium, rather, to the left atrium, through those what? Pulmonary veins. Very, very good. So, between the blood that is coming from the tissues and the lungs, there is what? An exchange of what? Air, or exchange of what? Gases. We're going to talk more on that. But what I want us to know is that between that blood vessel and the alveoli of the lungs, we have what? A barrier. We're going to list the contents of the barrier as we continue. So physics of gas diffusion, let's go over it again, is what? Pressure is inversely proportional to what? Volume. And we talked about gas partial pressure as what? Pressure exerted by what? An individual gas in what? A mixture of different gases. Very, very good. And we know that gas moves according to what? Pressure gradient. When there's higher pressure here and there's lower pressure here, gas will tend to move in this what? Direction due to what? Pressure gradient. Very good. So I believe we've gotten this point very, very, very well. Right?
Yeah.
That's the physics of gas diffusion. Pressure moves according to what? Concentration gradient. When there's much pressure here, gas moves according to that what? Gradient. Now, the next point I want us to talk about is oxygen concentration. What is the concentration of oxygen in 100 milliliters of what? Blood. What do we think? What's the concentration of oxygen in 100 milliliters of what? Blood. We are going to talk about that now. Oxygen what? Concentration. Alright, before we get there, I think we did not talk about the partial pressures in the veins and partial pressures in the arteries. Did we talk about that?
No.
Oh, we're looking so dumb. What's happening? What's happening? We're looking so dumb. Are we getting it?
Yeah.
Who cannot sleep in? Alright.
We'll get it.
We'll get there, right? Alright. We talked about the partial pressure in the alveoli and partial pressure in the what?
Capillaries.
Good. Now let's talk about the partial pressure in the what? Blood vessels. Now, what's the in the arterial side? This should be our arterial side, and this should be our what? Venous side. Now, what's the partial pressure of what? Oxygen in the arterial side? What do we think? If the partial pressure of oxygen in the alveoli is 102, as you said, 102 millimeters of mercury, what should be the partial pressure of oxygen in the what? Arterial side? Actually, we talk about it's about 95. 95 millimeters of what? We'll talk about that. Okay, let me quickly iron that issue before we go ahead and we'll talk about it. Now, as blood is leaving the what? The lungs to the what?
Okay.
Systemic circulation. What happens? Remember that in the bronchioles. Now, in the bronchioles, there's what we call what? Bronchial circulation. Let's get this point very well. It's very, very important. There's in the bronchioles that what called what? Bronchial circulation. Bronchial circulation. And we know that the exchange of air is between what? The tamin or the alveoli and the what? Blood vessels, right? So the bronchial circulation that is being drained by the bronchial veins directly go into the what? The arteries that are leaving the what? The lungs. You get the point very well. Let me go over it again. Now, this is the lungs. Let me take this as an example. I can draw very well. You can see my diagrams are always very nice. Let's take this. Oh my God. Oh my God. All right. Anyhow, it is the lungs. Now, this is example. This is the lungs. For example, our what? Blood vessel, right? Very good. Now, inside the lungs, we know that what? They are bronchioles, right? Good. Now, this bronchioles has what? Blood supply. And that type of circulation is called what? Bronchial circulation. Bronchial circulation. Very good. It's called what? Bronchial circulation. Now, and note in every circulation we have what? Arteries and what? Veins. Veins carries what? Deoxygenated blood. Now, blood is coming from what? Tissues. These are muscle. Blood is coming from the tissues, drained by what? The veins, down to the what? The lungs for exchange. Now, the blood that is used by the tissues of the bronchioles drain into their veins directly. These are arteries. From their veins, they directly what? Drain into what? The blood that is already what? Oxygenated from the lungs. Did you get that point? Let me take it over again. Now, CO2 is coming, deoxygenated blood is coming from here. Do you get the point? Now, it gets down to this place. It gets what? Oxygenated. Now, oxygenated blood moves into the what? Arteries, right? It's going into systemic circulation again. Now, venous blood from what? Bronchial circulation. It doesn't drain into what? The vein. It drains into the what? The artery that is leaving the what? The lungs. That is going into the what? Systemic circulation. I don't know if you get the point. Did you get, should I go over it again? No.
Question.
Okay, question.
What blood vessel supplies the bronchial part?
What blood
Vessel supplies the bronchial. Is it
Bro-
because you are saying it is the venous blood from the bronchioles
Yeah.
that enters into the arteries.
Good, good.
And then, so what vessel
Mm-hmm.
supplies the bronchioles?
What vessels supply the bronchial?
Yeah.
They are called bronchial arteries.
Bronchial
Arteries and veins, yeah.
So that means from the tissues,
Yeah,
it's called is a vein,
yeah.
but when it enters into the lungs, the name changes to
Alright.
bronchial artery.
Okay, let me okay, let me make it clear. Okay, let me make it clear. Now, these are the tissues of the body. Tissues can be muscles, anything at all. These are the tissues of the body. We know all blood drains into what? From down into the vena cavas, right? Inferior vena cava and what? Superior vena cava. From the vena cava they go into what? The right atrium. From the right atrium they go into what? Right ventricle. From right ventricle through pulmonary atrium they go into what? The lungs. You get the point? Now, as the blood gets into the lungs, what happens? There's exchange of gases. Good. But you could see that the exchange of gases happens at the what? The terminal portion of the lungs. Between the alveoli and the what? The blood vessels. I don't know if you get the point. Good. Between the alveoli and the blood vessels. Now, this is the bronchiole that comes from the trachea. Blood that supplies just that bronchiole that comes from the trachea into the lungs tissues has the different circulation from the circulation of the body. Did you get the point? I get my point. You're not getting my point? Okay. Maybe I should do an example. Please, David, come. Now, let example, here is what? Systemic circulation. This is bronchial circulation. Do you understand? Now, systemic circulation has been what? Oxygenated through the what? Air-blood barrier in the what? The lungs. Now, I am bronchial circulation. What I am doing is just to what? Supply blood to the what? The bronchioles. Do you understand? After the blood has been used up by the bronchioles, of course, what happens? It gets what? Deoxygenated. Right? That deoxygenated blood needs to be what? Re-oxygenated again. Do you get the point? Oxygen has to enter that blood again. So what happens? It has to directly go into the oxygenated blood. Do you get the point? It doesn't go into the venous blood that is coming to the lungs. It goes directly into the what? Oxygenated blood that is leaving the lungs. Did you get the point?
Yeah.
Did you get the point?
Okay, for the benefit of some of us here,
Yeah.
I want you to, make it much clearer in the sense that, there are different technologies that we have to know.
Okay.
There are different technologies that we have to know. For example, the difference between pulmonary artery and pulmonary what? Vein.
Good.
And even when it even enters into the bronchial, there's a bronchial artery. And there's different other technology there. So when you make good use, when you explain the use of these technologies,
Okay.
I think the explanation will be clearer.
All right.
Because pulmonary artery,
Of
course, is different from pulmonary what? Vein.
All right.
It's different from the normal vein and artery that we know.
Good. All right. I didn't go much into that because of time, and I believed we knew that one before now. Pulmonary vein, apart from every other vein in the body, it's only pulmonary vein that carries what? Oxygenated blood. And apart from every other artery in the body, it's only what? Pulmonary artery that carries what? Deoxygenated blood. So from the right ventricle, what carries deoxygenated blood? Pulmonary artery. Through the pulmonary trunk, carries this blood down to the what? To the lungs to get what? Oxygenated.
So
Then,
from where?
huh?
From
the right ventricle, pulmonary trunk, from there down into the what? Lungs for reoxygenator. After oxygenation, what carries the artery back to the right, to the left ventricle, to the left atrium rather? Pulmonary veins. I don't know if you get what I'm saying. So it is pulmonary veins. So it is this pulmonary vein that is carrying this oxygenated blood that this bronchial artery or this circulation drains into. Did you get my point now?
No,
It's clear now?
Yeah.
Okay.
But within the lungs,
Yeah.
there's another technology there, right?
What terminology is that?
That's what you're using the bronchial arteries. That one is.
It's just like, okay, now I get it. It's just like femoral artery that supplies the what? The femur, right? Femoral artery. The arteries that are around, that supplies these bronchioles are called what? Bronchial arteries. Do you understand? So those arteries need to what? Get reoxygenated again. They drain into, the oxygenated blood gets into their vein, bronchial veins, and from there back into what? The what? Pulmonary veins.
So bronchial artery. Sorry, I want to make things work.
All right, I get it. No, this is the purpose for this class. Do you understand? So we could understand ourselves very, very well.
That means bronchial arteries are deoxygenated blood.
Bronchial veins.
artery.
Did you get my point?
It's the bronchial vein which
It's
are
bronchial
deoxygenated.
veins. Yeah.
So it's the bronchial arteries that then supplies into the pulmonary vein.
I don't know if you know. Bronchial arteries supplies. Bronchial vein drains.
Bronchial artery supply.
Do you get the point? Bronchial arteries supply the bronchioles with oxygenated blood.
Okay.
Then bronchial vein will drain or carry away deoxygenated blood into what? Pulmonary veins. Did you get the point?
It carries deoxygenated blood into the pulmonary veins.
Yes, that is leaving the lungs.
But we just said pulmonary vein carries oxygenated blood.
Do you know where the confusion is?
What was it?
But you understand what I'm
The
saying?
initial statement was that pulmonary veins carry oxygenated blood,
Mm-hmm.
and then pulmonary arteries carries deoxygenated
Oxygenated.
blood. That is where the is confusion.
Sorry.
Okay.
I think the confusion has come in where you said there is a bronchial arteries, those arteries which are living there. So his question was the bronchial. I think his question was the bronchial veins. Are they joining into the bronchial arteries which are living? The one you drew there.
Okay, whether the bronchial veins are joining. This is not bronchial artery. I hope you know that.
No,
That
so
one
it's
is
what
what?
I understand.
These are pulmonary veins. Pulmonary veins going into the heart. Let's draw the heart here. Sorry. Okay. I don't want us to get confused, and this is the purpose for it. Okay. Now, these are pulmonary veins going back into the what? Heart with oxygenated blood. Why we came down to this is we are discussing why in the alveoli we have what 102, and why in the what why in the what systemic circulation we now have what 95. Do you get the point? So that's what we are trying to what clarify. So now, when deoxygenated blood that's coming from bronchial circulation drains into these pulmonary veins, what happens? There is a mixture of what? Deoxygenated blood and oxygenated blood. That's the point I wanted to make. Do you get my point? There is a mixture of deoxygenated and what? Oxygenated blood. And when they mix up together, what happens? Saturation reduces, pressure decreases. And as pressure decreases, it decreases from 102 to what? About 95. And the percentage that was 100% before, 100% saturation, you know, when blood is oxygenated, there's 100% what saturation. We'll talk about that. The saturation level decreases from 100 to about what? 97%. Have you gotten your point clear now? You gotten your point clear? You gotten your point clear?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. All right. Do you now know the reason why it was now 95, no longer 100 or 102? Do you get the reason now? You got the point now? Do you guys saw it? Yeah. You got it? All right. Let me take it over again. Bronchial veins drain into what? Pulmonary veins. Pulmonary veins that is going into the what? Heart, and reduces the pressure of the what? The partial pressure of what? Oxygen that was originally in the what? Alveolus of the lungs to about 95, and the percentage dropped to about what? 97% of saturation.
So the bronchial artery, so the bronchial vein carries what of blood?
Deoxygenated blood. Yes. There is no exemption. The only exemption is pulmonary vein and pulmonary artery. Those other ones are different. Do you understand?
Yeah. But my question is, if
sorry.
Oh,
Continue.
sorry. Continue.
Okay, good.
No, continue.
Let me get your question.
I'm cool with the stuff.
No, get clarified. Get clarified. You have to get clarified.
I want to make things, much better.
Okay.
That's what I'm asking.
Okay.
My question now is, good. Pulmonary circulation carries deoxygenated blood.
Pulmonary circulation.
Yeah. Sorry, pulmonary artery.
Pulmonary artery carries deoxygenated
Deoxygenated blood. Now, agent of gases occur, or it gets oxygenated when it enters into the lungs. Am I right? So when it is leaving, why should it be carrying deoxygenated blood again?
My brother. Okay, sorry.
Because
There's difference between pulmonary circulation and systemic circulation and what?
Bronchial circulation.
Systemic circulation. We have systemic circulation and we have bronchial circulation. This circulation is totally different from all other circulations we have been talking about so far. That we've talked about lesser circulation and greater circulation. This circulation is different. Do you get my point? This particular circulation is different. Do you get the point? This circulation drains into the pulmonary veins that is leaving the lungs to the heart, thereby reducing the concentration. Do you get the point? You get my point very well. So don't confuse it with pulmonary circulation. Don't confuse it with systemic circulation. Pulmonary circulation, lesser circulation. Don't confuse them at all. Do you get my point? It's a very, like, it's a very, how will I say it? It's a very,
Tricky.
yeah, it's like a very trickish phenomenon. If you don't get it very well, confuse it. You can just see it in the textbook why 95% in arterial blood. Okay? Now let's continue. These are taking a lot of our time, right? Alright, let's continue. Now, we have to talk about oxygen concentration in 100 ml of blood. Oxygen concentration in what? 100 ml of blood. Now, in 100 ml of blood, 100 milliliters of blood, what is the oxygen concentration? How can we get oxygen concentration in 100 ml of blood? We have to what? We know oxygen is transported in what? Two forms. We'll get to that. But I just want us to clarify this point. Since it's like that in the what? Model question. Let's clarify this point. Are we getting it? Let's clarify this point. For us to get the concentration of oxygen in 100 ml of blood, we have to what? Talk about the transport forms of oxygen. Do you understand? Now, oxygen is transported in what? Two forms. Oxygen is transported in two forms. The first form is what? By hemoglobin. And the second one is what? In dissolved form. Dissolved form. Oxygen is transported by hemoglobin, and second one in a what? Dissolved form. Now, we'll talk about this in detail when we are talking about transport of oxygen. But now let's talk about the concentration of oxygen in 100 ml of blood. Now, we know hemoglobin. We have something like this, plus something like this. And we have something like this. And we have the pyro rings. And this is the pyro ring. And this pyro ring, together without iron, is called porphyrin ring. But with the porphyrin ring, but when they are connected together, they are called hemoglobin. Now, this hemoglobin monomer, because we know hemoglobin is made of what? Alpha 2 subunit and what? Beta 2 subunit. So they have to be what? 4. So transported form of oxygen will have to be what? 4. We have to draw like times 4 of this. So how many oxygen can be transported? 1, 2, 3, 4. And we know that 1 milligram of hemoglobin, 1 gram of hemoglobin transport what? 1.34 milliliters of oxygen. Let's get this point very well. Now, and dissolved form. Dissolved oxygen is kept in dissolved form by what? Partial pressure. Partial pressure of oxygen. Is kept in dissolved form by what? Partial pressure of oxygen. We'll get to that. Now, for a normal healthy human being, we know the normal, we always use 70 kilograms as what? Somebody that was normal. So normal healthy human, we have what? 15 grams of what? Hemoglobin. It will transport what? 15 times 1.34 will give us what? Let's calculate it out. 15 times 1.34, about 20. About 20. Somebody calculate.
20.1.
Is that?
20.1.
20.1, right? Very good. 20.1. Yeah, about 20. 20.1. Did you get it? About 20.1. Now, in dissolved form, oxygen do not dissolve completely. Oxygen loosely dissolves. So in 1 milligram, or in 1 milliliter of blood, oxygen dissolution is about 0.003. Are we getting it?
Sorry, can you please in one?
In 1 milliliter,
Yeah.
oxygen dissolution or dissolution in 1 milliliter of blood is about what? 0.003. You know, dissolved form don't have anything to do with hemoglobin. This has to do with hemoglobin. This has nothing to do with what? Hemoglobin, because it has no connection with partial pressure, with hemoglobin.
Yeah.
You get the
That's
point?
connection with partial pressure.
Yes, it's connected with partial pressure, and this is not connected with what? Partial pressure. We are getting somewhere.
Yeah.
All right. Now, in 1 milliliter of blood, oxygen the dissolved form of oxygen is what? 0.003. So in 100 milliliter, what will happen? This one is very easy. It will be what? 0.3. 1, what? 2. It will what? 0.3 milliliters. So if you add it up, 0.3 plus this will be about what? 20.4. So in average, this is the what? Concentration of what? Oxygen in what? 100 milliliters of blood. Are we getting the point? Are we getting the point?
Yeah.
Do you get my point? Are you getting my point? Are you listening?
But she's thinking, so can she do
Okay.
I think maybe we start from 15.
Okay, let me start. Are you getting my point, Sonia?
When does the 15?
Yeah.
Good. Now, in a normal, you take physiologically or medically, you classify like the standard weight of the person should be about what? 70 kg. In a 70 kg man or woman, what do you have? You have about 15 grams of what? Hemoglobin. Do you get what? In 100 ml of blood. In 100 ml, in a normal healthy human person, you have what? 15 grams of what? Hemoglobin.
So 70 kg of gram is 15.
In a 70 kg man, in 100 ml of blood, you have about what? 15 grams of hemoglobin. Do you get that point very well? Do you know why I'm not we are not laughing much today? Because this, we have to get this point very, very clear. It's one of the what?
It's
It's one of the most confusing parts of respiratory system, because we have to play with figures. Are you getting the point? Now, in a 70 kilogram man, in 100 ml of his blood, if you examine it, you see 15 grams of what? Hemoglobin. And we already laid a foundation that 1 gram of hemoglobin transports what? 1.34, approximately 1.34 milliliters of what? Oxygen. So in a 15 gram, of course, will be 15 times what? 1.34, and we have what? 20.1. You get the point very well? Clear. Good. We have 20.1. Now, in dissolved form, what keeps gases in dissolved form? According to Henry's law, gases are kept in dissolved form due to what? Partial pressure. I'll get to the point.
Yeah.
Now, partial pressure keeps oxygen in dissolved form, and oxygen loosely dissolves. Let's get that point very, very well. Oxygen do not dissolve very, very well in blood. Do you get the point?
Yeah.
So, in 1 ml of blood, oxygen dissolution is about what? 0.03. Whereas in 100 ml, it will be what? 0.3. Have you gotten that point clear now? Do you get the point clear?
Yeah.
Okay, but was it clear?
No, it's good.
Good. 0.3 ml. Now, 0.3 plus 20.1 is what? 20.4 milliliters. So that is what? Oxygen concentration in what? 100 ml of what? Blood. Have you gotten the whole mathematics now?
Yeah, question. Can it be combined form with like carbon?
Eh?
Can it be like combined form with carbon?
Oxygen?
Yes.
Generally in blood, do you understand? If carbon dioxide binds to what? Hemoglobin that transport oxygen, we'll get to that in transport form. What will happen? Oxygen will be deloaded. We'll get to that point later. Okay? I just came to this point because of wanted to talk about the what? Concentration of oxygen in 100 ml of what? Blood. Very, very good. Now let's go over to the next point. We've talked of the partial pressure of oxygen in the alveoli, we've talked of concentration. Now let's talk of concentration of carbon dioxide. I'm going according to the model questions. I don't know if somebody have it here. You have it here? You don't have the model questions here? Okay, very good. Now, I'm going accordingly the way it is written in what? The list of questions we have. So that's why I'm going like that in that base. Now, the next is concentration of what? Carbon dioxide and its partial pressure in the alveoli. We talked of the partial pressure of carbon dioxide in the alveoli, right? We said it is what? 40 millimeters of mercury. Please, when you're answering it in the module control,
You have to state it.
please, let's add the units to it. 40 millimeters of what? Mercury.
So what's the question again? So,
Carbon dioxide concentration in the alveoli and its partial pressure.
So what we're finding is
This is oxygen
Oxygen.
100 millimeter.
of blood. You get it? Have you gotten it? Now, so let's try to add the units. Very good. Now, CO2 in the lungs, let's take this to be the lungs, or let's take this to be the alveoli. Okay, let me draw a better picture. Now, this is alveoli. This is alveoli. And let's take this to be the blood vessel. This is alveoli, this is the blood vessel. Now, CO2 concentration in the alveoli is what? 40 millimeters of mercury. CO2 concentration in the blood vessel is what? In the venous. This is the venous end. And this is what? Arterial end. CO2 concentration in the venous end is what? 46 millimeters of mercury. CO2 concentration in the arterial end is what? What will it be? Less. Good. So it will be what? 40 millimeters of what? Mercury. Is this
Same as in the alveoli. Same as alveoli.
very good? Very good. It's the pressure that comes from the alveoli, of course, that is transferred into the what? Pulmonary veins that drains into systemic circulation. So it will be the same thing. Just like if we had 102 for what? Oxygen in the alveoli. It was supposed to be 102 in systemic circulation. But what happened? Due to what? That mixture that came from bronchial circulation, what happened? It decreased down to 95. Are we getting the concept clear now? Are we getting the concept? Very
But
good.
did we talk about the partial pressure in the venous side?
Venous side
Oxygen.
of
Yeah,
oxygen.
oxygen.
Oh, we didn't talk about that. Oh, partial pressure of oxygen in the venous, of course, it will be low. 40. 40. Of course, very low. Very, very low. And also, let's go back to that place. Just make something clear. The pressure that helps in what? Okay, we'll get to that diffusion. We'll get to that much open. Now, 40 in the what? Alveoli. For CO2, please. CO2. On the venous side, we have what? 46. So what are we seeing? Pressure what? Gradient. Are we getting it? What are we seeing? Pressure what? Gradient. So when this is 46, it will allow for what? Movement of gas from what? Venous blood into the what? Alveoli. Are we getting it? Due to this pressure gradient, this is 46, this is 40. What's the differential? 40 minus 6. So this is the pressure that allows for what? Movement of what? CO2 from venous blood into what? Alveoli. Are we getting it very clear? Are we getting the point very clear? Very good. So this gradient is what helps us to what? Renew our blood gases. If you watch the first lecture, we said what? What is breathing in the first lecture? We said breathing is the what? It's a complex process that involves the what? Permanent and continuous renewal of what? Blood gases. If you watch the statement, it was what? Very, very carefully picked. Complex and what? Complex, permanent, and continuous process. Why is it permanent? When immediately you stop breathing, what happens? You die. Very good. Now, so this pressure gradient. Now, partial pressure of CO2 On venous side, 46. On arterial side, of course, what? 40. That was transport from what? Alveoli. Now we are going to go to a very interesting part of the lecture today, which is what? Diffusion of blood gases. What
Before you
causes?
continue, what is the amount of CO2? Like you will be able to calculate the volume of CO2 in 100 milliliters.
Now, what you have to know is CO2 that diffuses or dissolves very, very, very much than what? Oxygen. About 20 times. CO2 diffuses or dissolves 20 times more than what? Oxygen. And has affinity for hemoglobin even more than what? Oxygen. Do you get the point? So CO2 is higher than what? Oxygen. Oxygen dissolves what? Loosely. But CO2 what? Dissolves what? Greatly. Are we getting the point very well?
Yes.
Are we getting the point very well? Very good. Now let's go to diffusion of blood gases through the respiratory membrane. How diffusion occurs. All these were just what foundations we actually laying to get down to this particular point of the lecture, which is very, very important. Now let's. Do you have any question?
The question.
Diffusion of blood gases through the respiratory membrane. Now let's get to that point of it very well. Are we all clear on the previous part? Are we clear now on the previous part?
Yes.
All right. Very good. Now, diffusion of blood gases. What is diffusion? We'll start from there. Now, what we are doing, we are preparing for model questions, and we are going to act as if we are in what? Directly in front of our teachers. One thing I keep telling people anytime I meet them is, when once you are in front of your teacher answering your question, please try as much as you can to pull away fear from your mind. See the teacher as your friend. Try, when you get there, greet the teacher. Make it a friendly environment. And at the end of the day, the model will be very sweet. All my models have been very sweet, my teachers. Make it a friendly environment. Greet the teacher, how are you? And you sit down. If possible, if you have a close relation, ask the teacher question. How was yesterday? How was the model yesterday? Make it friendly. With that, you guys are going to be on the same pace and you can pour out everything you have in you. But if you come in like they do next and you just, as if you are coming to seek for job interview. At the end of the day, you might have everything inside of you. You might have everything inside of you, but you can't be able to give out everything. All right, let's continue. Now, diffusion of blood